So with that, Kate, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and we're going to get the first session of A Seat at the Table in 2022 started.
Wonderful. Thanks, Daphne. Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here. Start of a new year and cold today, but hopefully our conversation is going to spark lots of curiosity and good conversation. For anyone returning to A Seat at the Table, welcome back. For all of our new folks in the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I think most people know I'm going to keep the history of A Seat at the Table rather brief, but started in 2021 in the heat of the pandemic, and really just a way to stay connected and continue to have meaningful conversations about critical issues. We have so much to talk about, and the most exciting part is that we have three absolutely incredible, phenomenal, knockout rock star artists with us today. To me, I consider them all trailblazers of today and tomorrow in so many different regards. And they communicate creatively about so many different subject matters, often complex, often they're able to go deeper than what any kind of spoken word or traditional conversation can say. We're going to spend the next 90 minutes discussing Black Lives Matter today and tomorrow, pain and healing through the art. And in many ways, of course, this is our uplift to Black History Month, but two of my favorite sayings are celebrate Black History Month every month, and Black history is American history. So even in spite of the fact, right, that we are here today to really uplift Black History Month. Again, I'll say it again, celebrate Black History Month every month, and Black history is American history. It's critical to remember that. I think before we get started, one of the commitments of A Seat at the Table series, and all of us here on this call, including the artists, we believe very firmly in cultural sensitivity. And that's something that we've stood in front of and behind since day one, is just cultural sensitivity. And I think we all kind of know what that is, but just to give you the definition, cultural sensitivity is when we're able to acknowledge how the things that we have in common, and then also our differences. But here's the critical part. It's without judging and without assigning value, without saying your differences or your way is better or worse than, good or bad, right or wrong. So again, cultural sensitivity is acknowledging similarities and differences without assigning value and without judging. So I just like to keep in mind and remind everyone here on the call, on the event today, that all of us are here simply to acknowledge nuance and depth in a conversation. We're not here to instruct or to moralize or to preach about what you should believe, how you should believe, or who you should believe. But all of us here believe in the creative experience of collective conversation. It's really important to take that away. If you can just remember, again, I think cultural sensitivity is something we as a nation, we as a world can continue to work on every day, is acknowledging without judging. And so without delaying this incredible conversation any further, excited to get started. Today, our three amazing guests are Jill Wells, Iowa native, signature artwork, narrative paintings that oftentimes investigate race, history, stereotypes, accessibility, and the human experience. We'll also hear from Emmett Phillips. He's returning for the second year. Love Emmett, founder of the nonprofit Speak Your Piece. He is an Oak Ridge neighborhood educator and freedom fighter. I call him that. Focus on performing arts, hip hop, poetry, and the spoken word. And also we have Cadex Herrera with us today, Belizean multidisciplinary artist focused on human, social, and environmental injustice, champions immigrant and foreign-born, people of color, and marginalized peoples from around the world. So first, before we talk to the artists, I'd like to introduce Stephen King, the Executive Director of the Des Moines Arts Festival. Good morning, Stephen. How are you today?
Good morning, Kate. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much for your leadership and passion. As Kate said, I'm Stephen King. I'm the Executive Director of the Des Moines Arts Festival. A Seat at the Table is an organizational initiative to help elevate cultural equity in our arts community. It's important to me to value the impact that the arts have on our collective communities and to share experiences. I think the arts allow for many things, but as it relates to these conversations, it allows us to communicate really the social and the emotional work that we need to do as a community. We want to ensure that the conversation moves forward. I think that we're, a country of cycles, and this is too important. We've got to keep the conversation going. We have to present opportunities for us to listen and for us to share experiences. And I think shared experiences bring awareness. They teach us what we don't know about ourselves and what we don't know about our community, and they serve as an opportunity for understanding. So I know that I learned something every single lesson. So thank you again. Thank you, Kate. Thanks to all of our panelists for being here today.
Thanks, Stephen. And next, I want to introduce Daphne Dickens, and she is the Director of Guest Engagement and Production for the Des Moines Arts Festival. Stephen was able to talk just a little bit about why this conversation, right? Black Lives Matter movement and healing, why that has importance and weight to the art space and to the conversation when it comes to art. Daphne, would you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us if you have any thoughts on how this conversation continues to impact the art space?
Sure. Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending. I love seeing these numbers keep rolling in, and every time we increase more attendees, and so to have, giving artists and community members a voice in this realm is really great to see. So like Kay said, I'm Daphne. I'm the Director of Guest Engagement at the Des Moines Arts Festival, kind of overseeing some of our programming and production that our organization hosts, as well as 3-day festival that's at the end of June. Celebrating 25 years this year. See you all then. But kind of to piggyback off of, what Stephen had mentioned, I think this still goes back to the core values of the Des Moines Arts Festival. A couple of those that really stick out to me is that one of our values is to impact community, and we would like to foster and celebrate the involvement of all people. So obviously at these conversations, we have artists, we have community leaders, that want to learn more and just have a voice and to participate in the conversation in a respectful way. And secondly is promoting collaboration. We promote and inspire meaningful collaboration to strengthen the arts community. So I think one thing that's really great to see post conversations that we will sometimes hear about is when the panelists start collaborating on some sort of art project, or if we're able to connect one art organization to another art organization that participated in the conversation. So just to see that collaboration happen within our community is really great. So I'm glad you're all here, and I look forward to today's conversation.
Wonderful, thanks, Daphne. All right, so first and foremost, I want to introduce to everyone Jill Wells. I am a huge fan, and if you have not familiarized yourself with the art of Jill, you're just missing a delightful experience, to say the least. I want to be that girl on the butterfly so badly, but Jill has an incredible way with bringing emotion to canvas in a way that I think it's so difficult sometimes for all of us as humans to find through regular conversation and words. Jill, you're such a powerhouse. We are so unbelievably fortunate to have you here with us in Des Moines, in Iowa. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Kate, for that warm and amazing introduction. I feel blessed to be here with everyone today, so thank you all for joining us in this conversation. I am a 41-year young biracial woman with short hair. I'm wearing a blue shirt today, and I'm sitting in a room, and behind me on the wall are 3 square colorful paintings on Braille. And I'm an Iowa native, an artist, an advocate, and mentor. And I was born in Des Moines, raised just south of Des Moines in a small community of Indianola. And in 2005, I earned my bachelor's degree from Drake University in Fine Arts and specialized in painting. And I would say in large part due to those who came before me, my upbringing in the Midwest, my family, our community, and really the innate work ethic that was instilled in me through my family, that I've really arrived where I'm at today to be here with everyone. So my practice has journeyed just over 20 years, and I'm working towards creating meaningful, inclusive works of art.
Thanks, Jill. She's so modest. But thank you so much. Like I said, thank you so much for being here. And thanks for telling us more about you. Next, I'd like to introduce Emmett Phillips. Emmett Phillips was with us last year. He's so amazing that we had to bring him back again for year 2. Emmett, I get all kinds of energy and inspiration, and I feel like I am not taking enough action, actually, when I talk to Emmett. Emmett is incredibly motivational. Emmett is no stranger to Des Moines and to the youth of our communities. I have so much admiration, respect for who you are, the voice that you share, and what you bring to the table. So, Emmett, 100 high fives to you for all that you do. Tell our audience about yourself.
All right. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. First, I must say and honor one of my favorite revolutionaries, Brother Fred Hampton. All power to all of the people, the beautiful people. I'm honored to be here. So I'll start with my background, and then I'll just tell you a little bit about me. I was raised by 2 beautiful parents that were born in Liberia, Marie Emmett Phillips. They've been married for over 30 years. That is something I'm very proud of. They raised me with love, with self-respect and self-awareness. So I've carried that through my whole life. My major transition into my purpose started in middle school with hip hop. And hip hop is, that was like the catalyst for everything I've done since then, diving into freestyle sessions in the hallways of every school I've been at, the parties, the performances, the shows, and the people, the movement, which is a multinational movement and always has been. That really influenced my life. So since middle school and high school, I've been an artist, and I've been using the tools of hip hop because I learned that practicing the arts, really any art form, it can help you discover yourself, discover what's important to you, what's meaningful to you, and also help you connect with others. So I've lived a life of connection, and I've dabbled into theater. And with that, I must say, theater is also a very human-oriented art form that I really love. So shout out to all the theater makers in the world. I've combined these 2 elements with education to spread the love. So for the past 9 years, I've worked with several organizations. I could give shout outs for hours, like most places in Des Moines, most theater companies in Des Moines. Shout out to Pyramid Theater, shout out to Iowa Stage West, Des Moines Playhouse, all of that. I could do too many shout outs, but that's my little introduction. Y'all gonna have to help me out because I got so much I could talk about and so much to share, but I'm here. I love y'all. And thank y'all for putting these pictures. Y'all selected some beautiful pictures. I'm here staring at my babies, smiling big. That's what it's about. That's what this love is about. And that's what art is about to me. So thank y'all.
Thanks, Emmett. Now you all see why I said what I said. I get tons of energy just from listening to him. I'm like, wow, I need to step it up a couple notches. And certainly last but not least, what a special guest we have with us today. Cadex Herrera, what an icon. I think of Cadex as a global, oh my gosh, there aren't enough words to really put the magnitude, but I'd say a global activist where it really comes to justice for all people, extremely passionate, multidisciplinary artist. Cadex, would you be willing to say hi to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. First of all, thank you for a seat at the table on the Des Moines Arts Festival for creating this space for us to, talk and discuss and have a conversation about art and Black Lives Matter. And then also to you, Kate and Daphne, for organizing and putting this together and keep connecting with me to, get my stuff on the, get my things in order here. But anyways, yes, my name is Cadex Herrera, and I was born and raised in Belize, Central America. I immigrated to the United States when I was 19 years old. And I've always had art as a way for me to, not even realizing, but it was a way for me to sort of get away from my reality of growing up. It was a tough life growing up in Belize, and art has always been a way for me to divert from and step away from all sort of those sort of realities. And it wasn't until later on in life that I realized that was part of my self-imposed therapy. And I've always been interested in art, and it wasn't until some years ago that I decided to make a concerted effort and change to sort of start redefine for myself what I wanted to be and to do as an artist. And I started to create art that spoke about the social injustices that I was seeing in this country, in my own country, in my own life, and how that was affecting me. And then I made the decision to also focus more on the victims rather than the perpetrators. And so that evolved into the artwork that I create today. I'm an advocate for immigrants, Black people, brown people, indigenous folks. Also, I advocate for my history and my culture, and try to as much elevate, and talk about my roots and Belize and my people as well. And also, I create art to try to sort of talk to my own people about who we are, and we should be proud of all of our predecessors and all those folks that came before us that made our country what it is. And yeah, so right now I'm continuing that journey as an artist, and working with a lot of nonprofit organizations and organizations that are meaningful to me and are doing great things.
Thanks, Codex. I want to start with you today. And Daphne, if you would be willing to leave up the mural of George Floyd for a second, because I'd like to ask Codex a question specifically about that work. So you and I had such a special opportunity, really special for me, that I had the chance to get to know you and talk to you one-on-one about your experiences and how your George Floyd mural came to be and what moved you and inspired you for that work. Would you tell us about, help us sort of feel what you felt in that moment? Like the story you shared with me was incredibly impactful, and it really hit me emotionally and I think psychologically, because you helped me sort of go back to that day that you sort of put your stamp like on the world and made a huge statement. So would you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'd like to start first by talk about my history as a Belizean. So Belize is nestled in the Caribbean and Central American, Spanish-speaking Central American countries. Belize was colonized by England, and we got our independence in 1981. Belize is an incredibly diverse country and small, and so I grew up with just different people growing around me, and we never looked at each other as of course, racism existed, but growing up, they were just my friends and people. And there was, Black people and brown people and indigenous people. I myself, I'm labeled as a mestizo, which is a sort of colonial term made by the Spanish to refer to someone mixed race. I am Mayan and Spanish and African. But none of that really sort of came into the fray of my life and my upbringing until I started experiencing growing, later in life, that feeling of not being accepted because of the way I looked or sounded. My first experience when I came to America was at the airport, actually, where I was in a line with folks, and I was the only one whose bag was searched. I thought that was really strange. As I began doing artwork and thinking about what my journey as an artist was going to be, and started to do, activist work, I started really focusing and zoning in on all of these murders that were happening here in the United States. And a lot of them are being perpetrated by, police officers. And there's this tremendous amount of just unprecedented, it seemed to me, and of murder, right? Of these atrocities that are happening to brown, Black, and Indigenous peoples. And I was like, what's going on here? And what can I do as an artist to sort of say something? Me, myself, in my little studio in my house, what can I say? What can I do? So I made a conscious decision not to focus on the police officers, not to focus on the perpetrators, but rather focus on the humanity and of those folks that were killed by the police. And so I remember when Arbery, this young man, was killed by these two white men. It just put something in me that says, I need to honor this young man's life. And what can I do? So that very same day I heard the news, I saw the news, I decided to make a portrait. And at that time I was creating these pieces that involved creating artwork on dry erase boards. I was using dry erase board to show my students that, hey, you can create art with not a lot of materials. And so I decided to create this portrait. And then all of a sudden, about 2 weeks later, I created another one for another Black man that was killed. And then for another one. And I started seeing, and with every piece that I started creating, I became more and more upset and more, like I started seeing it everywhere. It became very apparent. And then all of a sudden it happened in the state where I live in, Minnesota. And I did not know how to react when I first saw the video of George Floyd. And to this day, I haven't seen, the whole footage, but it just sparked in me this visceral anger, incomprehensible distaste, and just this need for me to speak out. And I went out that afternoon I'm a photographer as well. I'm not taking photographs. And then I saw the crowds in downtown Minneapolis starting to gather. And then I made a decision to either be a viewer, outside, or participate. And I put my camera away. I said, I'm going to join these folks and demand justice for George Floyd. And so later on, I was contacted by a colleague of mine who asked me if I would be interested in creating a mural. And so I said, of course. And I already had all of these different emotions inside of me that it just came out of me naturally. And there was a few things that I really thought that was important for me to put in this mural. The first thing was that I wanted to make sure that George Floyd was seen as a human being. Secondly was for folks to remember his name. And third, also for people to see and reflect on the history of police brutality in America. And so it came together, sort of an inspirational out of grief, out of a call to action. I contacted the folks, and they said, we really like what you're doing. And we showed up that morning on a Thursday morning at about 7 o'clock. And I still not knowing exactly where this mural was going to go. And then I realized that it was an actual building where George Floyd was killed, like right in front of it. And so we took down the mural that was already there, and we started working on it. And the folks that were there that morning just would come and ask, what we were doing, and I would show them the sketch that I had done, and they were so they were thankful and amazed, and they became really emotional, and they thanked us for doing this work. And it was an incredible day, full of emotions and hurt and anger, but also celebration of George Floyd, and the fact that people were coming together, to say something about this.
Cadex, that is such an incredible, and I'd say powerful mural that you have. I think many people have probably seen this over the course of the last several years. I know that when I first had the opportunity to meet you and saw the mural, it is an image that I had seen previously. And I think it's really important the way that you tie it back to your Belizean heritage and culture and experience. I'm wondering, Emmett, would you be willing to talk to us a little bit about, similarly, what is, I think, the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the themes that surface along with that movement definitely speak to different people in different ways. So Can you share with us, what has BLM meant for you specifically as an artist, right? Like, how has it resonated with you or not?
Yes. So that's a beautiful question. Since I started making art, because I started with hip hop, particularly like golden era, 90s era hip hop, the subject matter, and this is actually like a tough reality, but the subject matter of Black Lives Matter and what it represents and the issues it's fighting against have existed for far too long. And as artists, we've been speaking to these issues, and through hip hop, through many forms of art for years. So for me, I've been living this life and doing this work and having these critical opinions about injustice, which is like the real core of things, my entire life. And it was never relegated to one group of people, not even just people that look like me. I'm against injustice anywhere in all forms. And no, hold on, let me correct that. I'm pro peace, and I'm very much pro doing positive works and being constructive as a human being. So anything that is contradictory to that, I cannot stand, and I am against. So Black Lives Matter, I saw that as something that arose with a rather recent tragedy, which reflects many tragedies that have happened, and it was a cultural response, and I respect it. But to me, personally, I'm on the block with the kids doing the work every day. I'm making the art every day. So it's almost something that came up in my periphery as I'm doing the work, and I'm going to continue to do the work. And that's I respect what's going on with it, but this is a life. This isn't a movement. This doesn't have a name. It's not a brand. It's not owned by anyone. If you're about justice, I love you. Let's work. Let's do it. I don't care what other political values or what other things you have going on, or your nationality. I would prefer a good, diverse group of people, because there's many issues. To be honest, I have an activating event in my life. One of my closest friends, Kevin, he was a so-called illegal immigrant from Guatemala. He was shot and killed. I've been against gun violence ever since. Okay, and one of my a good friend of mine that I went to high school with was killed by police, and he was what people would call white. Okay, so I don't like trying to attach race and color to issues of humanity, of the human soul, inequities that are deep inside. This is about humanity, So I have my own culture. I love it, but I love and respect everybody else's as well, because I'm an artist. I'm a man. I'm a human first, So that's how I feel about it. I respect those who are, who subscribe to the particular form of revolution. But I got Black Panther energy. I got Civil Rights Movement energy. I got BLM energy. It's all about doing the work to me, So that's all I'll say.
Yeah, no, thanks. Like I said, your energy is unmistakable. You know, one of the things we talked about, so I just wanted to let our audience know that Jill is trying to join back on our call. We are going to hear from her, but she's having some technological difficulties. So
I'm backlogged in.
oh, yay. I was so
Yeah.
worried. I'm so glad you're back, Jill. Wonderful. Well, we're gonna ask you a very similar question, which is, you know, we've been talking about how different movements or different themes inspire people in different ways, and that's okay, right? So for yourself, you know, what did the Black Lives Matter movement mean to you specifically as an artist? You shared some of that with us the other day on one of our meetings, and I would love for you to talk to our audience about that.
To me personally, in large part, the Black Lives Matter movement has meant change, and especially on a global scale. And what I found, again, for me personally, was that there's this premise of problem solving interwoven into the movement. And that relates directly to my personal mission as an artist and within my practice. And the other thing that just resonates with me is one of the primary problems that I found Black Lives Matter was addressing was this preventable loss of life. And that has always deeply resonated with me and has been greatly troubling. And additionally, there's a lot of problems that come up with the loss of life that I think that we can become desensitized to. And those complications are vastly individual. And the more I watched some of the media and listened to a lot of the stories, I just found that there were just countless parents in the Black Lives Matter movement that were getting up every single day, living with the pain and the loss and the trauma of having to have buried a child. And why did they have to do this? And in many cases, that loss of that child came in part because I feel like that child was not given the benefit of the doubt. And why? Merely because of the color of their skin. And so the psychology that's behind that, I feel like, is what is at the root of many of the systemic issues of racism. And when Stephen was talking about the cycles that we go through as a people, and Emmett had talked about that too, is that there's just this constant cycle of that. And, you know, for anyone who has lost a child, like a loved one, it's just, if it's preventable, then I feel like that's what the movement is trying to do. And it ends up becoming where BLM is like this political football kind of match that's taking place. And the hardcore fact is that, you know, for these parents, that's not what it's about. And that soundbite that people move on from very quickly, that doesn't operate the same for these parents.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. I have another question for you. You know, when you introduce yourself, you talked about yourself as a biracial artist, part of your identity. And at what times, or have you ever throughout this movement felt conflicted based on your own personal experiences as an artist? I mean, with having your identity sort of amplified by a world that becomes divided over, you know, components of who you are. I tend to feel some of these similar conflicting feelings because, you know, although I am a person of color, you know, my whole family is white. And so when I see the way that we will take an issue and be so divisive and polarizing about things like race, and people like you and I who personally identify and walk that line, how do you reconcile that for yourself? Or is it not, do you not feel it the same way? Just wondering if you would be willing to be transparent with our audience about some of these really intimate, difficult issues that I think people are afraid to talk about, but that I think are really important to understand.
I think that I learned very early on that if any of us go and search through our genealogy, we're going to find that there's a multitude of mixed cultures. So in a way, a lot of people could say that they're biracial, right? Different races within the genealogy. And so when I was growing up, and some of the things that I would hear, it was confusing for me to try to find my identity, because I felt like I was honestly no different, that I was existing with other human beings who had just an immense amount of different backgrounds, cultures, heritage. So reconciling that, it came through a lot of historical study and through my art and a lot of my early works. I think it's very evident, at least to me, that I was searching for I guess that personal identity through portraying what I was finding in history that was not educated to me.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to speak on that. I think, again, these are some of the nuances that add depth to these conversations that help people understand why certain things resonate to different people in different ways. And these are not easy things to necessarily articulate in words. That is one of the things I love about your artwork, though, is I feel as though I can experience an emotion that I could never really speak on just by looking at some of your artwork. So thanks for, taking some risk and going there for the audience and just helping us better understand who you are. Codex, I'd like to come back to you a little bit and ask you, you talked a lot about your experience as an immigrant, as a Belizean artist, as an activist, as an advocate. And I think a lot of those roles can be critical to the healing process or the grieving process. And so my question to you is, although the title of our conversation deals with healing, from your standpoint, from an art standpoint, are we even at the stage where we can talk about healing, or are we still grieving? And again, how do you see art as that critical tool or bridge to help us process all of these really intense, difficult to understand emotions?
Right. Well, first of all, I think that the moment we forget to stop grieving, that we think that it's okay then we have forgotten the reason why we're grieving. I don't think we should ever stop, thinking about the hurt that has been caused, and to keep the idea of, through whatever means, to keep that idea of remembering, and always keeping that as a form to keep us moving forward, to progress. And so to me, grieving takes many different forms. And some of those might be art, some of them might be emotional, physical, creative grieving. But I think that we should always keep a little piece of that to keep us grounded, and also not to forget about what has happened, and then at some point to make sure that doesn't keep happening. And to me, that's important, because the second we start grieving, we stop grieving, we start to forget. And I think that we can't afford to forget, especially because there's so many forces and powers out there right now that want us to forget, right? They want us not to talk about it. They want us to say that everything's okay. And even after George Floyd was murdered, it's continuing. You're not hearing a lot about it in the news or the media, because for some reason it feels like it's placated, right? However, I think that us as as people that care, as advocates, as human beings, as artists. I think we have to continue to express how we feel about the situation, racial injustice, police brutality, injustices against humanity and immigrants. And if we have the power and the time and tenacity and to dedicate at least some time, for us to reflect and look back and do some of that grieving so that other folks might know and understand where we're coming from. I think we keep those conversations going. And then art comes, for me personally, art is part of that. Not only as a personal way for me to grieve, but also for me to understand where that grief is coming from and why do I feel, compelled to act creatively the way I do. Do I want to create beautiful landscapes? Of course, and paint beautiful flowers? Yes, but I feel that as an artist that does work that's centered and anchored around that idea of activism, I feel like I can't. And I don't really want to either, because I feel that the work that a lot of artivists and artists who do this kind of work, it's incredibly important. And it's a way for us to inform and also echo, what smaller or the little things that are happening, right? There's so much stuff happening in this world that we need to keep that going.
Yeah, let me ask you. So one of our audience members, and thank you audience for your comments, these are great, but one of our audience members, Codex, says, the mural of George Floyd is absolutely amazing. And I have heard that people travel from all over just to take in the beauty, the message, and the memory. And so when you were creating this mural, I mean, did you ever have any idea that this would become a symbol for grieving and healing, for remembering, for uplifting? I mean, it's become iconic in so many ways.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, initially, like I said, it was a response. It was a call to action. It's like, as an artist, what can I do? I felt like so useless. So useless seeing this man getting killed on the street, right? You feel so defenseless and so inadequate. I don't know. It was just this, and then just seeing it was so. I can't explain it. There was just such a mixture of anger and sadness and almost like this need for revenge, and it's like we need to go out there and do something. And I asked myself, what tools do I have, right? Creating this mural was a response, was the way I responded to how I was feeling. Never in my wildest imagination did I expect a response from the local community, national, and as well as the global community to it. But I think that a lot of it had to do with people needing something to give them a sense of reflection and something peace, and also there's this thing that happens a lot in media, and it happened a lot more before people started identifying it, where whenever a person of color was involved in any crime, especially when it had to do with law enforcement, there was this strong tendency to bring out the bad in that person, right? They would darken their images. They would look for photographs where they have guns, or they look for photographs where they're a mugshot, things like that. And so what I wanted to do was to say, what, George Floyd was a human being, first and foremost. The police, they're not judge, jury, or executioner. He was a man who was going about his daily life. He had a family, he had a daughter, he had people that loved him in his community. And that's what I wanted to say. And we just wanted to create it and step away from it, right? And say, this is my contribution to this terrible event, And as we were creating this mural, people started gathering around. And in a way, they were grieving with us and celebrating with us. And there were some folks who would come up and ask us if they could just put a little dab of paint on that blue wall or on his name. And I remember this grandmother who kept coming. She came at 8 o'clock that morning, and then 10 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock. And every time she would come and look at the progress. And the third time she came, which was about 1 o'clock that afternoon, she brought her granddaughter with her. And her granddaughter asked us if she could paint. So we gave her some brushes and some paint. And on the bottom left-hand corner of the mural, she painted all that blue part of that background. And I remembering thinking to myself, in all the commotion that was happening that day, going, a child should not be doing this right now, right? This little young girl should not be painting a mural of a dead man in her community. You know, she should be in school. She should be celebrating with her friends in the park. But she's part of this history now, right? She's part of this event, and it will forever be part of who she is as a human being and about her history. So the response globally that we got from this piece was unprecedented to me. Never did I think that I was going to get the response that I did.
And I think sometimes I personally find that to be one of the magical things about art is that oftentimes as artists, right, when you create something, whether it's a song or a poem or a piece of work or a mural, you're doing it with no intention other than to capture, right, the moment, capture the essence, capture the feeling, capture whatever it is that you're trying to harness or trying to express. And we often don't have an intent. It's not like we create something and go, hope this one ends up in a beautiful gallery, or hope this hits the stage. It's the biggest, recognized image of 2022 or anything like that. We do that because we're trying to harness something special, and it's up to the world to decide, how they will in turn receive that and use that. Emmett, I know for you talk a lot about a certain process. I'm not, an intervention, a tactic, a strategy that you use oftentimes to help heal with our community's youth. So for you, art, healing, trying to walk down, right, this memory, many memories that so many young people have. Imagine, I'm trying to think back in my lifetime of the different images I had growing up as a young child of people who looked like me or people who resonated with me being killed, or that kind of trauma that you would experience. Share with us about your process and some of the power that you find for healing through the work you do.
Yes. Wow. So as I was listening to our panelists, a mantra kind of came up, and I want to use that as a way to answer your question. I'm aware, so I act. I'm aware, so I act. Okay. I've been aware of injustice, racism, oppression my entire life. So I've acted in the most constructive ways possible and will continue to act until I leave this earth in the most constructive ways possible because I'm aware. Okay. So for example, I'm aware that many of our youth are lacking in self-esteem. Youth of all nationalities are lacking in self-esteem, self-confidence, and support in their home systems, and broken families. That's probably one of the worst problems I've ever seen in my life. In 9 years, I'm only 28. So what do? I'll put myself in the school. I'll put myself in Oak Ridge. I'll put myself on the stage. I'll put myself around these youth and present them something that is of a quality vibration to help actually address the issue. I'm aware of police, that certain individuals in the police force can be walking around with racist tendencies and ideas. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to be anywhere around. I'm not going to make myself available for to be a target the best I can. I'm going to be so busy doing my constructive work that it's going to be hard to catch me. out here. It's gonna be hard. I'm aware, so I act like I have to. I have to continue to do my work. I'm aware that art is a transformative practice. It can help heal people. So I'm gonna bring theater in your school. I'm gonna participate in the hip hop shows and speak to the pain I have in my heart. I'm gonna address these issues. That is all I know. I did want to make a comment as I'm listening to about George Floyd. My heart goes out to that situation and that family, but I don't like the sensationalization of specific acts of injustice or violence and murder. I think that's ludicrous. I have children and students in Des Moines that have passed away and it wasn't from police. And so why are certain individuals being like almost fed to us to focus on more so than others? I don't like the spiritual notion of that. I'm not going to be told who to grieve or who to highlight. I'm already living with grief and I already love humanity. So you're not going to have me focused on one particular individual because of a certain situation that happened. I don't like, I push back against that notion.
Emmett,
Yes.
So we talked about this a little bit, and I again, these conversations are really powerful because one of the things that we're doing is we're able to hear lots of different perspectives.
Yes.
About lots of different things from three uniquely talented and brilliant people, artists. And this is the power of the conversation, because oftentimes one of the things, Emmett, that you talked about is the sensationalization, right? The
Yes.
control of what message do we receive, right? What is the message that is projected? And what's the intent? What's the motivation behind why some conversations get so elevated and pushed to the top, and others disappear as though they never happened? They dissipate without even a word or a conversation. And that's one of the things that I think really, I think bother is too little of a word, right? But that's one of the things that really bothers you is like, okay, so yes, we have compassion. You have compassion, empathy, and you understand the power of the murder of George Floyd, but yet and still, to your point, there are all kinds of people living in that same reality that we don't hear about, that we don't remember, that we don't uplift. And so for you, I think you really feel as though there's some, it's disingenuous in some levels, but also I think, you're able to use art with so many different young folks. How do you see the benefit of that in the young people that you work? Tell us about, like the spark that you get from some of the individual students and our community's youth that you work with through these processes.
To be honest, as soon as I get off this panel, I'm jumping right back to work. I'm gonna be right back in it. And here's what's funny and beautiful about the art and the healing, okay? My students, okay, and shout out to Edmonds Elementary and the beautiful educators over there and those fantastic students, all right? And shout out to Oak Ridge neighborhood, okay? Because we're partnered up, so I'm always at Edmonds, So I'm gonna go over there. They know today is Thursday. Mr. E does not teach theater on Thursday. I do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They know that. They're gonna demand and ask and try to peer pressure me, essentially, y'all. Sometimes it's like they almost attack me over this. We want to do theater. Are we having acting today? We want it. Let's do it. And then I might sneak it in, but it's like there's a schedule, y'all. Like, come on now, I got y'all. Like 3 days ain't enough. No, Mr. E, it's not enough. No, it's not enough. And the energy they have about it. When they're there, they're confident. When they're there, they're safe. They're safe. When they're there, they're bold. They're outspoken. We read. We write scripts. They're empowered, they're intelligent, they're brilliant, they're seen, okay? So I'm about creating these environments. I know the world can be sick and filthy and dark and heavy. So that's why someone has to be very much concentrated on the light. Many of us do, so that is my response. And I love everyone who's doing that like so much in all the different ways. There are so many fronts to attack, so many ways that.
Yeah, Emmett, give us the scenario that you shared with me that really, I became educated by listening to you the other day on the meeting when you were explaining how it actually works, right? So you have these kids role play scenarios, right? And then as a group, they get to provide real life feedback through a theater type of intervention. And I really thought that was amazing. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, because I have kids creating plays, but what you're talking about as well is a specific social emotional learning activity. Thank you for reminding me. And I call that high road, low road. Okay. So once again, I'm aware, so I act. I'm aware that a lot of our children can make choices that they're going to regret based on basically not having the options that, hey, I don't have to punch this person because they did this. I don't have to, run out of the classroom because I'm having this problem. So a lot of our children, put themselves in really precarious situations because of not being able to, have that pause to think about what you're about to do and then make a different decision. So high road, low road was an activity to address that, So what I did was I'm like, children, think of a time where you made a decision that was not worthy of yourself, that was a poor decision. And then they'll give me a bunch of things like, I pushed this kid down in the hallway because he said my head was big. And I was like, okay, perfect. Let's take that. And I'm like, fantastic. And they're like, what? What do you mean? I got in trouble. I'm like, no, listen. Okay, let's take that. So let's put that up in theater. Let's recreate the situation. Okay, so I'm gonna have a kid. Now listen, kids, do not get upset because remember, we're just acting. This is just theater. So he's gonna call you big head. He's gonna say your shoes is dusty. Let's have a kid do all that to you. All right, and then go ahead and act out. Act even worse than you did in that moment. Just go crazy. And this is the low road. Like this, let's do that. Go crazy, have fun with it. And when the kids do it, they're laughing, they're giggling. We're totally, transforming the energy of the situation. But they're also seeing like, okay, this is pretty poor activity. This is the poor response. Then we flip it and do the high road right after. So now when that kid calls you big head, you can say, hey, my head is big, but it's beautiful, ain't it? Don't you love this big forehead? Yeah, these dusty shoes, man. I'll ball on you in these dusty shoes. What you talking about? And just change, like whatever you do for the high road, it has to be a more positive outcome. They love it. Okay. And it's funny. So it's like that's how we transmute. That's how we do alchemy with these situations. These kids got enough pain and are dealing with enough. So we got to give them tools and options, to do better. So I'm glad you asked me that to talk about that.
Thanks, Emmett, because I found that incredibly creative and what a dynamic way to use theater, use the arts, but in a way that really is helping our young people sharpen their tools, and it's actually adding tools to their toolbox. So the whole sort of synergy of that exercise I find to be really impactful. Codex, you also work with our youth as an educator. What are some of the ways that you've seen art be incredibly, valuable and have meaning to some of the young folks that you work with?
So I teach at a middle school and high school here in St. Paul, and I teach media arts. So I try to introduce technology to the students and how they can use technology to create art. A lot of the times and instances, students do not have access to technology. So how can a student sort of use that iPad or phone that they have in their hands to sort of create meaningful art that reflects who they are and talks about them, and also gives an opportunity for them to share their work. So that's what I do. However, some of the coolest things that I like to do as an artist is sort of teach outside of the school. So last summer, I got the opportunity to teach at the Walker Art Center, which is a museum here in Minnesota. And they asked me I could teach anything I want. So I worked and I decided that I was going to teach anybody who was interested how to create these traditional kites from Belize and Central America. And it ended up being such an amazing and wonderful experience because I had kids from all over the world, and from different backgrounds come and create these kites that I grew up making. And it was so wonderful to share part of my history and my culture with folks that they were so separated from each other as far as culturally and historically. And here we were together creating something that I used to do when I was a child. And I found that to be incredibly meaningful and rewarding for me. And then also just watching these kids and young families and even older folks running down a hill, flying a kite was so amazing. And so, to me, I think that art is not always about sort of the serious part, but also about the sharing of who you are as an individual and your history and having fun. And so.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a lot of fun. Myself, I need to try that with the flying the kite running down the hill.
Liberating.
That's right. So one of the interesting, I don't know, I guess maybe interesting isn't the right word, but I think one of the components about the Black Lives Matter movement, BLM, is that in many ways, this movement has been very uniting. It has helped sort of spark or reignite, based on all three of these talented artists who've been in the work for many, many years. It's not a new movement. It's not a new thing. Codex, you've been in this since you were a small child, with the story you shared with me of in hopes of finding an art scholarship when you were, a very young boy, right? And Belize. And then Emmett and Jill, both of you as well, have been engaged in making the world a better place for all people through art for quite some time. So, like I said, there's no secret that BLM has both been uniting for many reasons, but also in many ways it's been divisive and polarizing. And regardless of the reasons why, right? Who's played what role in making this a polarizing, divisive movement or idea or concept, the truth still remains that, I don't know that we have ever found sort of a place to stand together as a country when it comes to Black Lives Matter. And so, Jill, I'd like to start with you and just ask you the question, from an art standpoint, do you see this movement as something that's more uniting or more divisive, and why? And also, what would you say that art's role is in helping us all find more of a shared vision for our future? How can we use art to help us find intersectionality in this conversation? How do we find common ground to build from?
Great question. So in regards to the, I guess, polarizing or polarization of Black Lives Matter, I think for me, one thing that is key to remember is that Black Lives Matter is a collective movement of the people. And it started with a single hashtag by one woman on Facebook. And what happened after that, what we see now, is a direct reflection, this is how I see it, of the American people's will being acted. Like, that's how I see it. And that is so encouraging, so cool to be living in a time where I actually am experiencing that and not just reading about it, through in a history book. Like, we as a people can get behind each other's beliefs and create huge movements. And it starts with a spark from, someone that we connect with. And so we're living in a time that I think there's a lot of global disparities, and art has the power and the ability, when put into the hands of the people, like it has always been in our hands. Like, that's where art lives, in our hands and our minds and our soul. And so art's always been about access and legacies and passing down of history. And so that way it's always been political. And when you finally come to know art as one of the most powerful and historical forms of communication, I think we discover some of the concepts that are expressed in art and the symbols and the allegories and the meanings attached to those. So from like ancient times, images in particularly have been used as forms of communication. You think about cave art and Egyptian hieroglyphics, national flags, anthems. And that's where you see art becoming political. And so it's like, I think the question that would be really amazing is if we're not asking ourselves this on a regular basis, like what would happen when it's, you know, up to us or left in our hands? Like, what would we do with it? I think a lot of, so it's like us here on the panel, and hopefully anyone who's attending today, like starts to see art as that form of communication, and then asking yourselves, like, what would you do with it? Would you create a mural? Would you dance with a loved one? Would you, you know, do play therapy? Would you create a theater company? Like, what would you do with this form of communication that can be healing? And so to go back to that original question is like, anything I think that's historically, when you look at it like that, it can become political. And then it becomes the thing that divides us, when really it's at its nature, at its essence, that's not what it is. And it's not just for a select group of people. And that it's not like, oh, I went to art school, so I get to be the artist. No, it's all of art. Like, we all have the power of art. And so, like, if anyone's ever been in those conversations, who's attending today, who's like what's art and who's an artist, like, we all are. And so we all have the power in our hands, and it can become these movements.
Thanks, Jill. That was, I think you're giving everyone on the call a beautiful lesson about life, right? And individuality, and how something that is really intended to be just an expression, right? We each get to choose how we want to express, how we want to heal, how we want to grieve. But often the innocence of our choices then becomes politicized, or becomes something that divides us, when that was never the intent to begin with. So wonderful way of providing a response on something that's very complex and hard to articulate on. But yeah, thank you for that, that enlightenment. I definitely appreciate that. Emmett, how about you? Same question, because I think, again, part of the beauty of this conversation is to help our audience see that there are so many different perspectives. And it doesn't mean that the differences are, look, you don't have to have, vehemently opposing sides in order to have nuance and opinion on these topics.
Right.
The ways by which we are unique or micro, right? They're micro amounts of differences, but it makes all the difference. That's the nuance, that's the diversity piece. That's where we all find our own voice and have our own unique signature individuality and ways to express. So again, you and I have talked about how the Black Lives Matter movement, what it stands for, right? How it's interpreted can be both unifying and polarizing all at the same time. For you as an artist, how can we use art to bring us closer to a shared vision, closer to a shared heart space about how we see ourselves walking forward as a country?
Wow. Yes. In the words of one of my favorite African studies scholars and historians, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Black may tell you what you look like, but it doesn't tell you who you are. Some people sit with that, but let's continue. Art is love acted in all the beautiful various ways. That is that's a major part of the solution. It unifies people. It unifies people. It can. I don't think a movement or any type of art can be divisive, but I feel like people can. And you can have divisive energy and thoughts. That has to be addressed on a spiritual and individual level. Okay. as I look back at history, one of my favorite abolitionists was John Brown. You know what it takes to be a white man and lead a raid on Harper's Ferry with your own sons willing to die? And he was white, okay? The spirit of justice, the spirit of the artist is what makes the change. That's what will unify people. If you have a divisive spirit, it doesn't matter if you make art. It doesn't matter if you make art. You're gonna divide people with that. If you're a teacher with a unifying energy, you're gonna unify all the students, no matter where they're from. They're all gonna feel, like it's a spiritual thing. I want to promote that. It's in psychological and mental. If you're not the spiritual type, that's where it starts. So the art forms, the the messaging, the movements, as long as they're rooted in that, they will always be good to me. But once you deviate from your actual, from the actual intention, that's when it doesn't matter what you're doing. I got a problem with you, and I'm not rocking with your move. I'm not rocking with it. I'm not going to be involved with it. So.
Hey, Emmett, that comment or that statement that you made saying, that you asked everybody to sit with for a minute. I would like you to expand just a little bit, because I think that it was, wow, so much packed in that statement, right? But I would love for our audience to hear from you a little bit more about why that is something that you wanted to share with our audience, right?
Yeah.
So if you would state the statement again and then, enlighten us a little bit.
Perfect. So one of my favorite scholars, I recommend everyone to look him up. You can catch him on some of his old recordings on YouTube. Brilliant scholar for African studies and just human history in general. He said, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, he said, Black may tell you what you look like, but it does not tell you who you are. And honestly, that's part of the reason why my own family, my parents, they weren't even called Black until they came to the United States. They were never called Black where they're from. I work with students that are Dinka. They identify as Dinka. They're from Ethiopia. They might identify with a tribe. They might identify with a different term, so these terms can also be a form of divisiveness, so that's why I wanted to bring that up. And if we have a human-centered focus, then we can honor the beauty in everyone's national origins. We can honor, like, I love studying. I study the Mayan cultures, the Toltec cultures. I study African cultures, ancient European history. I love it all. It's all beautiful. All should be respected. And we've had wars and a history of violence as far as time has gone. And we also have artistry as far as time is gone, from all people in all spaces. So that's why I don't want people getting caught up in certain identities that don't even capture and honor who we are anyway. Focus on the energy and the spirit of being the solution and being who you are and honoring the beauty of who you are, whether you're Dutch, German, Mexican, wherever you are. You know what I mean?
That's a message that I believe everyone, not just on this call, but everyone should hear, because I think it has so much truth to it. And I always admire the way that you will speak truth to power. It's very, very, it's important message for people to hear and to think about. Again, if we go back to the beginning, when we talked about cultural sensitivity, we are not here to tell you at all what to think, how to think, who to follow, who to like, who to not like, who to believe, who not to believe. We're not here to tell you which side is right, which side is wrong, which side is better or worse. We are here to provide perspective and to give nuance and depth to some of these really complex conversations. So that's why I love pulling out different things that all of our panelists will comment on and getting them to go a little bit deeper with some of these thoughts. Codex, I think for you too, this is really interesting because, you're self-identified. When I ask you, what is your identity, right? You say, Kate, I'm Belician, and I'm an artist and I'm a man and I'm human. And just wondering, right, when we talk about the fact that Black Lives Matter can both be seen as uniting and divisive all at the same time. What's your perspective here? Because again, I'm sure that at some point you've had somebody say to you, look, you know, you weren't even born in this country. You're Belizean. Why do you care about Black Lives Matter? Why have you put so much of your heart space into the conversation in a very authentic and genuine way? So from your experience, what do you think? What can you share with our audience that will bring additional light to the conversation?
Right. So I started hearing about Black Lives Matter about maybe 3-4 years ago. And again, it was with that hashtag, and it sort of started evolving. To me, it was like an organization. It was a rallying cry about what was happening, right? Also, I believe that there was a lot of truth to what they were saying, and I believed in their message. Also, there wasn't a place or a central organization that was talking about the issues that they were talking about. Two, there isn't an organization in the Latino culture, right, that's talking about how many atrocities are being committed against immigrants and Latinos in this country. And so to me, it was like, it's important to have organizations like these, even if they sometimes evolve into something else. And I felt strongly, first of all, you know, the human aspect about, hey, you know, these things are happening. We need to talk about it. Somebody needs to say something and stand up. And I think that the BLM movement and Black Lives Matter organization, right, sort of galvanized a lot of those voices and sort of was a sounding board for how everyone was feeling, at least how I was feeling about the different sort of issues that were happening, especially issues surrounding race and injustice. And so I was, you know, as an artist, as an advocate, as an activist, I'm always looking for someone else to connect with me, right? And so BLM was that for me, you know, and you know, I'm a foreigner, right? But it doesn't mean that injustices are not happening where I come from. It happened. And I came to this country, right? And it doesn't mean because, you know, that prejudice and racism didn't happen to me. But even when I say it, you know, I say it to 2 or 3 different people and that it dies right there. So BLM became sort of that organization, that voice that had a lot of ears and eyes and has also that potential to create change. And I thought that was an important thing to have. And you know, and it's unbelievable that it took this long, right, for something like this to happen. And I think that as a contributing factor, as a contributing movement, I think they've done a lot of great things to move the conversations forward, move our own sort of perception of what the truth is. Because a lot of the times, you know, we see these things happening and there's only one side of the story, right? The media sort of has a tendency to carry it. And so to me, it was important to have that other voice that's really telling you the reality of what was happening. Hey, this happened and it was terrible, and you need to come out and say, you need to support, you need to come and advocate, you need to demonstrate, you need to protest. And so to me, that's what Black Lives Matter represents. It's an organization that is helping me as an individual, lives in Minnesota, right, sort of a little bit isolated from everything. That say, hey, this happened, you know, what are you doing about it? What can you do about it? And so, and also as an advocate for social justice, and also, you know, as a person who cares deeply about people, about and how we're treated, and seeing all of these injustices throughout my whole life, I thought, you know what, this is a meaningful thing. and it's a meaningful thing to stand behind, because it's affecting me, it's affecting my neighbors, it's affecting my friends, and it's important and that we have somebody, right, that's willing, organizational wise, to speak that truth to power.
Yeah, thank you. Again, you know, we have 3 unique individuals on our expert panel, and as you can see, we've delivered a lot of different, you know, questions and thoughts here, and you know, there's space for all of these perspectives and perceptions and philosophies and opinions. And you know, I'm going to have Daphne share with the audience a picture for me briefly. So these are my 3 girls, right? And we went to a Black Lives Matter march here in Des Moines. Thanks, Daphne. And I think that, you know, I just wanted to show that because, you know, when we're talking about uniting and divisiveness and, you know, everything in between, you know, we definitely had people, I had people say to me, you know, why would you take your small children to a BLM protest? And my response was, why not? You know, and I'll just say this, look, you know, I don't agree with every component of anything. Whether that's BLM or the Me Too movement, we can go down the list of every single thing that we've ever had. And I don't agree with 100% of everything, anything. There's always, right? There's always a fork in the road where you go, you know what? This speaks to me, this doesn't. And so, you know, to the point that I think each artist made, we make decisions not based in whole on any one given thing, but it's our own individual unique experiences that shape who we are and shape how we are going to utilize our voice, and in this case, use art as such a powerful communication tool, a way to unite us, a way to bring us closer together, a way to have difficult conversations, and a way to lean in. So, you know, we're getting close to the end of our time today. I cannot thank our panelists enough, Codex, Jill, and Emmett. For our audience, Daphne is going to make sure that you have all of the information you need to connect with these 3 very talented, brilliant individuals. Again, thanks so much for blessing our session today. The conversation certainly wouldn't have been the same without each one of you. We do have just a few minutes left. If anyone from our audience has a question, you can put it in the chat. And
Hey, I
like
want to
said,
go back to
Daphne-
a question that Mary Chapman posed
Yeah.
earlier. And Mary, I might need some help with you on this question. But you typed in, do you think the movement to legislate education curriculum translating into removing or canceling out art or artists is making a cultural historical statement? Are you referring to like statues that are being torn down, or am I completely off base here?
No, I think what I was referring to is, you know, there's this movement going around looking at books that have an ethnic historical background, like canceling out history that is prevalent. And if we have artists that are doing an amazing visual job of showing history and showing, you know, diversity. And is there going to be, eventually, is that going to spill over into artists, you know, muting their voice, muting their expression of the expression that we heard this afternoon, you know, about the issues that are confronting us in the social environment. And I think there was a statement that mentioned about, you know, art and being politicized. Will art be politicized, like, you know, education and the curriculum? That was my question. Is it going to spill over?
That's a great question. I'll turn that over to panelists.
Yeah, so first, I believe that especially art created by people of color is political in nature. Whatever art that we create is political, because we're not supposed to be creating art, right? We're not supposed to be expressing how we feel. We're not supposed to be telling the world what we think about it. And so from that point of view, at least for me, it's incredibly political, and it's always political, even if we're painting beautiful flowers. And also, I believe that the erasure of or trying to walk back in an educational system, any sort of talk or education about history from a different point of view other than the established norms, I think is a way to sort of quiet and stop this sort of movement that's already sort of started, right? About talking about the real history of what happened in this country. But not only that, I think that this is also a jumping point for other countries and other places around the world that have historically have had history from a Western point of view rather than the point of view of the indigenous people and then people that actually lived it, right? So I think that we're doing away with sort of that idea of that history that was created to appease those folks that lived there already and lived that history. And it's a scary thing for a lot of folks to sort of start to accept that there is a different history out there, that there's a real history, right? And there's real stories and real events that happen that are not being taught in schools. And
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that as well. Thank you. So I'll just use this quick example. So as far as like, will the artists be politicized? Will our voices be muted? I'll just say this here. I once was invited for an MLK celebration where the governor was there, Governor Kim Reynolds. And Mary, I let them folks have it. I ain't bite no tongue. You feel me? So, you know what I mean? Like, artists gotta come with it. You gotta be brave. You know, you gotta be brave. You gotta do your thing. There will always be a little opposition, but we can't let that slow us down. None of the panelists are. Many people in Des Moines are not letting it slow us down, you know? So we're good with it. You know, we're good with them trying to oppress us. We know something about oppression and suppression of our voices. So we ain't going nowhere. We ain't getting tired. We gonna keep speaking the truth to power.
Thank you, Emmett, and thank you, Codex. Jill, we have just a few seconds here left, but I didn't want to not hear from you if you would like to respond to Mary's question as well.
I say there's some amazing artists in the community that are running some amazing book programs. Blacked Out Books is one of them. You can reach out to Cameron Gray. He's on social media. If you're looking for access to literature that is basically either directly African-American history, or if you're looking for BIPOC, that's one of the things that I struggled with growing up in Indianola. Complete erasure, lack of education, caused a lot of problems. I don't agree with it. I don't want that cycle to continue. Again, to go back to a lot of the conversations and points, it's about time that ends. You know, BIPOC history is American history, period. It's global history. The way that we migrated. I mean, so if you feel like your school's not going to support it, if you feel like your artists are being silenced, because art, I agree with the rest of the panels, always been political, always will be political. That's part of the power of it. And it's what a lot of us have been talking about, what draws us to our art and our craft. Then reach out to your local artists or have some assistance in getting access to them. You can reach out, I think, to any of us here. And just join and collaborate with them. If you're an organization or a company that's looking to hire artists, I highly support you in doing that, because then you can have those conversations in a way that, again, that bypasses sometimes the verbal barrier using the visual. But that education needs to happen, and it's in our hands, and we are capable of being able to do that, all of us here.
Thank you, Jill. And, we are out of time today, but we knew from the beginning 90 minutes isn't long enough to have this conversation, but still, nonetheless, what a great moment. to share with all of you. And again, without our panelists, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So much love. Thank you for all you do. And until next time, I hope everyone has a fabulous day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.